What happens when the girl a pack throws to the storm wakes up in a cave surrounded by 15 wolves who would die for her? Saphira Dune spent her whole life as the nameless girl at the edge of the fire. In the Ashfall pack, Omegas like her were meant to scrub floors, patch torn leathers, and keep their heads down. But Saphira was worse than useless in their eyes. Her wolf had never answered. Her first shift never came. Her scent was oddly muted. On the night of the eclipse moon, Alpha Ronan Drax turned her humiliation into a spectacle. In front of the entire pack, he called her a blemish on the Ashfall name, stripped her of her rank, and cast her out into a brutal ice storm with nothing but a thin dress and a breaking heart. She stumbled through the blizzard until her legs gave out by a jagged ravine. There, hidden behind a curtain of hanging ice, she found a narrow opening in the rock, a cave. A last, desperate shelter where she curled on the freezing stone and waited for the end. But the end did not come. By morning, Saphira woke in a pool of heat. 15 enormous wolves lay coiled around her like a living nest, fur pressed to every inch of her body. Their breath steamed the air. Their hearts beat in a slow, protective rhythm. They were strangers. They were rogues. And they were guarding her. Chapter 1. The Girl Thrown to the Storm. For Saphira Dune, being the Ashfall Omega meant a life of scraps and silence. She washed blood from warriors' boots while pretending she didn't hear them joke about how even the goddess had forgotten her. Every morning, she woke before dawn to stoke the fires in the pack house. She scrubbed stone floors until her knees bled. She patched torn leathers with needle and thread, while other Omegas at least had wolves to comfort them in the dark hours. Saphira had nothing. Her scent was described as thin, hollow. Warriors like Theron Cade would wrinkle their noses when she passed, as if her very presence offended them. Other Omegas, like Kaya Rowan, whispered behind her back that even the lowest wolf was better than no wolf at all. Saphira's parents barely looked at her anymore. They had stopped trying to explain why she was different years ago. Now they simply avoided her gaze during pack gatherings, as if pretending she didn't exist would somehow make the shame easier to bear. On the night of the eclipse moon, the pack gathered in a clearing lit by torches and silver moonlight. Alpha Ronan Drax stood at the center, tall and imposing, his dark eyes scanning the crowd. Elders like Darian Voss and Ira Thorne watched from the raised platform with cold, calculating expressions. Saphira tried to stay in the shadows by the serving tables. She kept her head down, hands busy arranging platters of roasted meat and fresh bread. If she stayed quiet enough, invisible enough, maybe the night would end without anyone noticing her. But Ronan's voice cut through the celebration like a blade. "Saphira Dune, come forward." The crowd went silent. Every head turned. Saphira's heart dropped into her stomach. Her hands trembled as she set down the platter and walked toward the center of the clearing. The ground felt unsteady beneath her feet. Ronan looked down at her with something between disgust and pity. He began to speak, his voice carrying to every corner of the gathering. "For years, this pack has carried dead weight. We have fed and sheltered one who cannot shift, cannot scent, cannot contribute. Saphira Dune is not pack. She is a stain on the Ashfall name." Whispers rippled through the crowd. Some looked away, others leaned forward, eyes bright with cruel curiosity. Ronan reached down and tore the crude Ashfall mark from her neck. The leather cord snapped. The small wooden token fell to the ground between them. "You are no pack, no name, no claim. The goddess herself has rejected you, and so do I." Saphira's vision blurred. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. The world narrowed to the sound of her own heartbeat and the weight of 100 stares. 2 warriors grabbed her arms. She didn't fight. There was no point. They dragged her from the clearing, away from the torchlight and the feast, toward the dark line of mountains that marked the edge of Ashfall territory. The Frostline Mountains rose like jagged teeth against the night sky. Wind howled through the peaks, carrying the promise of ice and death. The warriors dragged Saphira up a steep trail until they reached a narrow ledge overlooking a deep ravine. Ronan had followed. He stood at the edge of the firelight, arms crossed. "The storm will take care of the rest. If the goddess wants you, she knows where to find you." Then they shoved her forward into the whiteout. Saphira stumbled through the blizzard. Snow lashed her face. Ice formed in her hair. The thin dress she wore was no protection against the cold. Her bare feet went numb within minutes. She couldn't see more than a few feet ahead. The wind screamed in her ears. She fell twice. The second time, she wasn't sure she could get back up, But something inside her refused to die on her knees in the snow. Some small, stubborn spark that had survived years of humiliation and neglect pushed her forward. One step, then another. The ravine appeared suddenly, a black gash in the white world. Saphira nearly fell over the edge. She caught herself on a jutting rock, gasping, and saw it. A narrow opening in the stone wall, half hidden behind a curtain of hanging ice. A cave. She squeezed through the opening, scraping her shoulders on rough stone. Inside, the wind's howl softened to a distant moan. The temperature was still freezing, but at least she was out of the direct storm. Saphira collapsed onto the cave floor. Her whole body shook. Her teeth chattered so hard she thought they might crack. She pulled her knees to her chest and wrapped her arms around herself, trying to hold on to any warmth she had left. She whispered into the darkness, her voice barely audible. "If you're listening, goddess, please make it quick. I'm so tired of being nothing." Her vision faded. The cold crept deeper into her bones. She closed her eyes and waited for the end. But as consciousness slipped away, something warm brushed against her cheek. A low, steady heartbeat that was not her own pulsed in the darkness. Chapter 2. The Nest of 15. Saphira woke to warmth. Not cold, not death, warmth. Her first confused thought was that she had died and the goddess had taken pity on her after all. But then sensation flooded back. She felt heavy fur pressed against her legs. A deep, rumbling breath stirred the air near her ear. The smell of pine and stone and wild musk filled her nose. She tried to move and realized she couldn't. Something held her in place on all sides. Saphira's eyes snapped open. Dawn light filtered through the cave entrance, painting everything in soft blue and gold. And surrounding her, packed close like pieces of a perfect puzzle, were wolves. 15 massive wolves. They lay in a tight circle around her, their bodies pressed against hers, fur overlapping, tails draped across legs, massive heads resting on paws or flanks. They formed a living nest with Saphira at the center. Their combined body heat wrapped around her like a blanket. Panic surged through her chest. These had to be rogues. Wild wolves. She was prey. She was trapped. But as she started to hyperventilate, one of the wolves, a massive creature with silver eyes and dark fur traced with faint, glowing veins, lifted its head and looked directly at her. Instead of teeth or aggression, the wolf simply nosed gently at her hand. Another wolf, smaller but no less intimidating, draped its tail more firmly over her bare ankles like it was tucking her in. Saphira's breath hitched. They weren't attacking. They weren't even restraining her. They were keeping her alive. The largest wolf, scarred along one flank with amber eyes that seemed to glow in the dim light, rose to its feet. The movement was fluid, graceful, unnaturally controlled. The other wolves shifted to give it space but didn't leave Saphira's side. Then the wolf began to shift. Saphira had seen pack members shift her entire life, but never like this. The transformation was smooth as water, bones reshaping without a sound of pain, fur melting into skin. Within seconds, a man stood where the wolf had been. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with scars crisscrossing his bare chest. His amber eyes were the same as the wolf's, intense and knowing. Dark hair fell across his forehead. Steam rose from his skin in the cold cave air. He crouched beside Saphira, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. One calloused hand reached out and cupped her jaw gently, thumb brushing just below her ear as he checked her pulse. His touch lingered a second too long. Their eyes met, and something electric passed between them. Curiosity, wariness, recognition of something neither of them had words for yet. "You're awake," he said. His voice was low, rough like gravel and honey. "Good. We weren't sure you'd make it through the night." Saphira's voice came out as a croak. "Who are you?" "Lucien Thorne." He pulled back slightly but stayed crouched at her level. "And these are the Varen Guard." Around the cave, other wolves began to shift. A lean man with pale eyes and calm features, introduced as Oren Lyse. A sharp-eyed woman with auburn hair, Saren Vale. A quiet, watchful man, with dark skin and silver streaks in his hair, Evren Varek. A healer with flint-gray eyes and capable hands, Lyra Quinn. Others remained in wolf form, content to stay curled around Saphira as the introductions happened. "We've been looking for you," Lucien continued. His gaze never left her face. "For years." "That's impossible." Saphira shook her head, confusion and disbelief warring in her chest. I'm nobody. I'm nothing. You have the wrong person. Oren stepped forward, his voice gentle but firm. You're not nothing. You're bound. What? Lucien settled back on his heels, forearms resting on his knees. Your wolf isn't missing, Saphira. She's caged. Someone locked her away inside you a long time ago. The words hit like physical blows. Saphira's hands clenched in the furs around her. That's not possible. I would know. I would feel it. You do feel it, Lyra said quietly. That emptiness you've carried your whole life? That's not absence. That's chains. Saren crouched on Saphira's other side. When you were rejected last night, when Ronan severed the pack bond in front of witnesses, something broke. The magic that was hiding you failed. Your scent flared across this mountain like a beacon. We followed it here, Lucien said, and we found you freezing to death on this stone floor. Saphira looked around at the wolves still surrounding her, at the strange, scarred rogues who spoke of prophecies and bindings like they were everyday truths. Nothing made sense. Everything felt too big, too impossible. Why? She whispered. Why would anyone bind a child's wolf? Lucien's jaw tightened. Because someone was afraid of what you might become. One of the wolves, still in animal form, pressed closer to Saphira and rumbled low in its chest, a sound somewhere between a growl and a purr. The vibration calmed something frantic inside her. Oren offered her a water skin and a strip of dried meat. You don't have to believe us yet, but you're safe here. We're not going to hurt you. Evren, who had been silent until now, added quietly, We've all been thrown away by someone. You're not alone in that. Saphira took the water with shaking hands. The kindness was almost harder to bear than the cruelty had been. At least cruelty was familiar. Lucien sat down properly now, close enough that his knee brushed hers when he shifted his weight. He didn't move away. Neither did she. There's an old prophecy, he said softly, about a wolf whose silence is not weakness but chains. A wolf who will break free and change everything. We think that's you. Saphira laughed, bitter and broken. I can't even shift. How am I supposed to change anything? Lucien's amber eyes held hers. Because you're not supposed to shift like everyone else. You're supposed to shatter. Chapter 3. The Bound Wolf. Over the next hours, as the sun climbed higher and warmth seeped back into the cave, Lucien and the Varen Guard explained everything they knew. They were a brotherhood of wolves who had been driven from pack territories for years. Some had been exiled for refusing corrupt alphas. Others had lost their packs to violence or politics. They had banded together, following fragments of an ancient prophecy carved in caves and whispered by dying elders. A hollowed wolf whose silence will break chains. A matriarch born without a howl but with power over alphas. A girl thrown away who will wake something sleeping beneath stone. Saphira listened, overwhelmed and disbelieving. She kept expecting to wake up, to find herself still dying on the cave floor. But then Lyra asked her a question that changed everything. Do you remember the first time you felt empty? Saphira's breath caught. She did remember. She had been 5 years old. There had been hushed, urgent arguments between her parents and the pack elders late at night. She remembered Darian Voss's cold voice, Era Thorn's calculating stare, and then a stranger. A woman with ice-pale eyes and hands that felt wrong when they touched Saphira's skin. The woman had made her drink something bitter and metallic. She remembered screaming that it burned. She remembered her parents holding her down, her mother crying, her father's voice shaking as he said, "Better small than dead." She had woken up the next morning feeling hollow, like something vital had been scooped out of her chest. They did it on purpose, Saphira whispered. Tears burned in her eyes. My parents let them do it. Lucien's hand found hers, warm and steady. They were afraid. Fear makes people choose terrible things. I spent my whole life thinking I was broken. Her voice cracked. I believed them when they called me useless. I thought the goddess had abandoned me. The goddess didn't abandon you, Oren said gently. People did. Rage kindled in Saphira's chest, hot and unfamiliar. All those years of humiliation, of believing she deserved it, of thinking there was something fundamentally wrong with her. It had all been a lie. Can you undo it? She asked. Can you break the binding? Lucien squeezed her hand. We think you can, but it's going to hurt. The guard formed a loose circle around her in the cave. Torches were lit, throwing moving shadows over stone and fur. Some remained in wolf form, lying close. Others knelt nearby in human shape, hands on the ground, lending their presence and strength. Lucien knelt directly in front of Saphira, close enough that their knees touched. "I need you to stop trying to call your wolf like a command," he said. "Instead, I want you to remember. Every time someone made you feel small, every insult, every moment you swallowed your voice because speaking would only make things worse." Saphira closed her eyes. The memories came easily, too easily. Ronan's contempt, Theron's sneers, the other Omegas who excluded her from their circles, the warriors who looked through her like she was invisible. Her parents' strained silence at meals. The cave around her seemed to fade. She sank deeper into the memories, into the accumulated weight of a lifetime of rejection. And then, in the darkness behind her closed eyes, something stirred. It was not gentle. It was not kind. It was rage given form, hot and vicious and alive. A voice rasped in her mind, foreign and familiar all at once. "They caged us." The force of it slammed into Saphira like a physical blow. She gasped, eyes flying open, and would have fallen backward if Lucien hadn't caught her. His arms wrapped around her, pulling her against his bare chest. One hand cradled the back of her head, the other pressed flat between her shoulder blades, grounding her. "I've got you," he murmured against her temple. "Stay with me." Saphira's fingers dug into his shoulders. Her whole body shook. The presence inside her was enormous, barely contained, pushing against the edges of her skin like it wanted to tear free. "We were supposed to be strong," the voice snarled. "We were supposed to be free. They stole everything." "I know," Saphira whispered, not sure if she was talking to her wolf or to herself. "I know." Heat built beneath her palm where it pressed against Lucien's chest. She pulled back just enough to look down and gasped. Her skin glowed. Faint, pulsing lines of light traced patterns across her palm and up her wrist, like cave carvings come to life. Lucien's breathing hitched. Where her hand touched his chest, directly over his heart, similar patterns were visible in the scars that marked his skin. They pulsed in time with the marks on her hand. Their eyes met. The air between them thickened, charged with something neither of them could name. Her wolf surged forward, drawn to him with an intensity that was almost painful. Recognition, hunger, belonging. Saphira's other hand came up instinctively, fingers tracing the scars over his heart. The moment she made contact, both sets of marks flared brighter. Warmth flooded through her, driving back the emptiness she had carried for so long. They were close enough to kiss, close enough that she could feel his breath against her lips. His hands tightened on her waist, pulling her infinitesimally closer. For one suspended moment, the world narrowed to just the two of them, glowing marks and matched heartbeats and the electric possibility of what might happen if they closed the distance. Then Lucien pulled back, jaw tight, eyes dark with restraint. His hands remained on her waist, steadying but careful. "We'll talk about this bond when you're strong enough to choose, not just need," he said, voice rough. The withdrawal stung, but somewhere beneath the disappointment, Saphira felt grateful. He was giving her agency, giving her time. After a lifetime of having choices stolen from her, that gift mattered more than he probably knew. Around them, the other members of the Varen Guard slowly relaxed. Saren let out a breath she had been holding. Evren's shoulders dropped from their tense line. "Your wolf is there," Oren said quietly. "And she's powerful. Now we just have to set her free." Chapter 4. What sleeps beneath the stone? The next day, Lucien invited Saphira to explore the deeper parts of the cave system. Saren and Evren came with them, carrying torches that threw dancing shadows on the stone walls. As they walked deeper into the mountain, the air grew colder and strangely still. The sound of their footsteps echoed strangely, like the cave was listening. Then they found the carvings. The tunnel opened into a wider chamber. Every surface was covered in ancient symbols and images, carved so deep into the stone that even centuries hadn't worn them smooth. Wolves encircling a spiral, a figure with eyes of light standing between packs, hands raised, symbols of chains and broken crowns. And beneath it all, something else. A darkness coiled at the bottom of the image, sealed behind layers of carved barriers. Saphira reached out, fingers hovering over one of the carvings. "What is this place?" Oren stepped forward, studying the symbols with careful attention. He had spent years collecting fragments of old lore, pieces of a puzzle that had led them to Saphira. Now, seeing it all laid out before him, The pieces began to fit together. "It's a warning," he said slowly, "and a prophecy." He pointed to different sections of the carving as he translated the old tongue script. "A hollowed wolf whose silence will break chains. A matriarch born without a howl but with power over alphas." His finger traced down to the darkness at the bottom. "And this? Something sealed beneath the mountain. Something that will wake if she never claims her power." Saphira's hand dropped. "Wake? What does that mean?" "I don't know," Orin admitted. "But whatever it is, someone powerful enough to carve this entire chamber thought it was important to leave a warning." As if in response to their words, the stone beneath Saphira's feet thrummed. Just once. A slow, deep pulse like a heartbeat. Everyone froze. "Did you feel that?" Saren whispered. They all had. And as they stood there, barely breathing, a gust of cold air blew through the tunnel from deeper in the mountain. It carried a scent that made Saphira's newly awakened wolf recoil. Old ash. Decay. Something fundamentally wrong. Everin moved closer to the group, eyes scanning the shadows. "We should go back." But Saphira couldn't look away from the carvings. Something about them felt personal, like they had been left specifically for her to find. She touched one of the carved wolves, and again, that deep thrum resonated through the stone. "The mountain knows you're here," Lucien said quietly. He stood close behind her, not quite touching, but near enough that she could feel his presence. "Whatever is down there, it's aware of you." The thought should have terrified her, and it did. But beneath the fear was something else. Determination. She had spent her whole life being afraid, being small. Maybe it was time to stop. Meanwhile, back in Ashfall territory, Ronan paced his private chambers. He couldn't shake the feeling that something had gone wrong. The hunt had been poor for days. Warriors were restless, and the absence of one worthless Omega shouldn't have bothered him. But it did. Darian Voss entered without knocking, his expression carefully neutral. "You called for me, Alpha? Has there been any word from the patrols near the frost line?" Darian's eyes flickered. "Just for a moment. None that would concern you. Tell me anyway." The elder sighed. "Strange sense. Rogue activity. Nothing confirmed." Ronan's jaw clenched. "Send Theron and a scouting party. I want to know what's happening up there." "Is that wise?" Darian asked carefully. "The mountains are dangerous this time of year, and the girl is surely dead by now." Ronan turned on him sharply. Then confirming her death should be simple. "Send them." Darian bowed his head and left. But as he walked through the packhouse corridors, his expression was troubled. He sought out Era Thorne in her private room, finding her staring into a scrying bowl filled with dark water. "He's sending scouts," Darian said without preamble. Era's fingers tightened on the bowl's edge. "The binding is broken. I felt it shatter the night he rejected her." "How is that possible?" "A pack bond severed in front of witnesses carries power. It tore the last threads of the spell." She looked up, her pale eyes worried. "If she survives, if she learns what was done to her, then we deal with it when the time comes," Darian said coldly, but his hands shook slightly as he turned away. Back in the cave, the guard made their way back to the main chamber. Saphira was quiet, processing everything she had seen. The prophecy, the warning, the sleeping thing beneath the mountain. As they settled around the fire that night, she finally voiced the fear that had been growing in her chest. "I don't want to be someone's prophecy. I don't want to be a tool or a weapon or whatever this is supposed to make me." Lucien was sitting close enough that their shoulders touched. He didn't immediately try to reassure her or tell her it would be fine. Instead, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "You get to choose what kind of power you become. Prophecies name possibilities, not destinies. You're not a tool. You're a person." He turned to look at her, firelight catching in his amber eyes. "And whatever wakes beneath this mountain, whatever Ashfall tries to do, I would rather face it at your side than spend one more year pretending you don't exist." His hand found hers in the space between them. He pressed her palm flat over his heart, over the scars that matched the marks on her skin. The gesture was simple, sincere, and it meant more to Saphira than any grand declaration could have. Around them, the other guard members murmured their agreement. They were with her. Not because of prophecy, because of choice. For the first time in her life, Saphira felt like she belonged somewhere, not at the edge of the fire, but at its center. Chapter 5. Voices at the cave mouth. Morning came with tension thick enough to taste. Saren returned from a scouting run in wolf form, shifting quickly as she entered the cave. "We have company." Ashfall scouts are moving up the ravine. The guard went still. Hands moved to weapons. Everin and 2 others moved to strategic positions near the cave entrance. Oren looked at Lucien, waiting for orders. But Lucien, for once, didn't immediately give them. Instead, he turned to Saphira. "This began with you," he said quietly. "Do you want to run or stand?" Saphira's first instinct was panic. The thought of facing Ashfall wolves, of being dragged back to that pack and that alpha, made her stomach turn. Every survival instinct screamed at her to hide in the deeper tunnels and let the guard handle it. But then her wolf stirred. That furious, ancient presence that had been caged for so long pressed forward, not with fear but with anger. "They threw us away," the voice snarled in her mind. "We decide if we stay gone." Saphira stood. Her legs felt unsteady, but she forced herself to move toward the cave entrance. The guard tensed, ready to stop her or protect her. But Lucien held up one hand. "Let her choose," he said. Saphira walked barefoot to the narrow opening in the stone. Cold wind bit at her skin, but she didn't retreat. She could hear voices now, carried on the wind. Theron Cade's familiar sneer. 2 other Ashfall warriors arguing about whether the scent trails they had picked up could really belong to the Hollow Omega. "She's dead," one of them said. "Has to be. No one survives a night in that storm." "Then why do I smell wolf scent all over this ravine?" Theron snapped. "Something is here." Saphira pressed her palm flat against the cave wall. She could feel the mountain beneath her hand, solid and ancient and somehow aware. Her wolf pushed closer to the surface, lending strength. She spoke, not loudly, not shouting, but her voice carried, amplified by the stone itself and by the awakening power inside her. "The girl you threw to the storm did not die." Outside, the voices stopped. Complete silence. Saphira continued, words flowing now. "She was claimed by wolves who understand the meaning of pack, wolves who guard instead of break. Tell your alpha that the Omega he rejected is alive, and she is not his to command anymore." The rock beneath her palm vibrated. The sound of her voice rolled through the mountain like thunder. Snow sloughed off ledges above the ravine. Fine cracks appeared in the ice hanging from the rocks. Outside, she heard scrambling, panicked voices. "We need to go. Now." "Did you hear that? Did the mountain just move?" The Ashfall scouts fled. Saphira could hear their retreat, rapid and terrified, back down the mountain. The moment they were gone, her legs gave out. Lucien was there instantly, catching her from behind, arms wrapping around her waist. He held her up as her pulse raced and her whole body trembled from the effort of channeling that much power. "You did it," he murmured against her hair. "They're gone." Her wolf purred with satisfaction inside her chest, pleased with the fear they had caused. The other guard members slowly relaxed. Saren laughed, a sound of pure relief and pride. Everin nodded approvingly. Lyra came forward to check Saphira for signs of strain, but it was Lucien's arms around her that steadied Saphira as the adrenaline began to fade. She leaned back into his chest, letting him take her weight. "Are they going to come back?" she asked. "Yes," Lucien said honestly. "But not today, and not unprepared. You just bought us time." That evening, after everyone had eaten and the initial excitement had faded, Lucien found Saphira sitting alone near the cave entrance, wrapped in furs, staring out at the mountains. He sat beside her without asking, close enough that their shoulders touched. For a while, neither of them spoke. Finally, Lucien broke the silence. "We can still leave. Move to another range before Ashfall organizes a real war party. The guard has patterns for staying ahead of pack politics." Saphira considered it. Part of her wanted to run, to hide, to avoid the conflict that was surely coming. But she looked back at the cave, at the place where she had crawled in expecting to die, and instead found warmth, at the wolves who had chosen her before she could even choose herself, at the ancient carvings and the sleeping thing beneath the mountain, and all the impossible possibilities she had never allowed herself to imagine. She thought about Ronan's contempt, her parents' betrayal. Every moment she had swallowed her voice because speaking would only make things worse. "I'm done running from people who are smaller than the storm," she said quietly. The words hung in the cold air between them. Not a declaration of war. Not yet, but a line drawn in stone. Lucien's hand found hers, fingers lacing together. "Then we stand." Together? She asked, voice small. He turned to look at her, amber eyes serious and warm. Together. If hearing Saphira's voice crack stone after a lifetime of being told to stay quiet lit something in you, don't let it fade. Hit subscribe to Ariel Romance Library so you're there when Ashfall realizes the Omega they threw away just claimed a mountain. Chapter 6. Chains and Choices. Back in Ashfall, Theron's report sent shockwaves through the pack house. He stood before Ronan, still breathing hard from the run back down the mountain, and described what had happened at the cave. The voice in the stone, the mountain trembling, the massive rogue wolves whose scents were all over the ravine. Ronan's expression grew darker with every word. When Theron finished, silence filled the chamber. Finally, Darian Voss spoke from his position near the window. She should be dead. Well, she's not, Ronan snapped. And now we have rogues fortifying a position in our territory. Era Thorne stepped forward, her pale eyes calculating. This is worse than rogues. The magic I used to bind her was tied to the pack bond. When you severed that bond publicly, you broke the binding. Ronan turned on her. You never mentioned that consequence. Because you were never supposed to reject her in front of the entire pack? Era's composure cracked. The binding required subtlety. You made a spectacle of it. What are you talking about? Ronan demanded. What binding? Darian and Era exchanged looks. The truth was coming out, whether they wanted it to or not. When Saphira was 5 years old, Darian said heavily, a seer came to Ashfall with a prophecy. She spoke of a girl born in this pack who would grow to have power over alphas, a voice that could shake stone, a wolf that could break chains and topple the order we've maintained for generations. Ronan stared. You're saying, Saphira? We were trying to protect the pack, Era said defensively. We had her wolf bound, caged inside her own bones. We muted her scent and blocked her shift. We thought if she never developed power, the prophecy would simply fail. Instead, you tortured a child and turned her into a weapon aimed straight at us, Ronan said, voice deadly quiet. For once, the Alpha looked shaken. He had always known Saphira was different, but he had assumed she was simply broken, defective. Learning that her powerlessness had been artificially created, that she might actually be one of the most dangerous wolves in the territory, changed everything. Her parents knew? He asked. Darian nodded. We convinced them it was for her own safety, that a girl with that much power would be hunted or killed or driven mad by the burden. They agreed to the binding. They thought they were saving her. Ronan turned away, jaw clenched. Assemble a war party. 20 of our best warriors. If the rogues want to fortify a cave in my territory, we'll smoke them out. And the girl? Era asked carefully. Bring her back if you can. Kill her if you can't. In the cave, Saphira was dealing with her own revelations. Oren had told her the full truth about the binding ritual, how it required parental consent, how it had to be renewed periodically through her childhood, how her parents had watched it happen, again and again, choosing her captivity over her freedom. The betrayal cut deeper than Ronan's rejection ever could. Saphira sat against the cave wall, arms wrapped around her knees, trying to process the fact that the people who should have protected her had been the architects of her cage. They were afraid, Lucien said quietly. He sat beside her, not touching but close. Fear makes people choose terrible things. They should have chosen me, Saphira whispered. Tears burned in her eyes. I was 5 years old. I needed them to fight for me, not against me. Lucien was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, You're right. They should have. And nothing I say is going to make that hurt less. The simple acknowledgement, the lack of empty comfort, somehow helped more than reassurances would have. Saphira let herself cry. Not the silent, swallowed tears she had learned to hide in Ashfall. Real, ugly, gasping sobs that shook her whole body. She cried for the child who had been betrayed, for the years stolen, for the wolf that had been screaming inside her all along with no one to hear. Lucien didn't tell her to stop or to calm down. He just moved closer, letting her turn her face into his shoulder when the sobs became too much. His arms came around her, solid and warm, and he held her while she fell apart. Eventually, the tears slowed. Saphira stayed pressed against Lucien's chest, listening to his heartbeat, feeling the rise and fall of his breathing. The cave around them was quiet except for the crackle of the fire. I'm so angry, she said hoarsely. You should be, Lucian replied. His hand moved in slow circles on her back. Anger isn't wrong. It's how you use it that matters. Saphira pulled back just enough to look at him. Their faces were close, breath mingling in the small space between them. The marks on her palm pulsed faintly where her hand rested against his chest. What if I'm not strong enough? She asked. What if they come back and I can't protect any of this? Lucien's hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing away the tear tracks on her cheek. His eyes held hers, intense and certain. Then we fight together. You're not facing this alone, Saphira. Not anymore. They were close enough to kiss. The pull between them was magnetic, impossible to ignore. Saphira's wolf surged forward, wanting, needing the connection. Lucien leaned in, his forehead resting gently against hers. For a heartbeat, they stayed like that, breathing the same air, balanced on the edge of something that would change everything. Then a howl echoed from the tunnel, Saren calling them to the main chamber. The moment broke. Lucien pulled back, expression rueful. We should go. Saphira nodded, even though part of her wanted to ignore the summons and close the distance between them. But duty called, and the moment had passed. Around the fire, the Varengard gathered for a different kind of ceremony. Each member, one by one, shared their story of how they had lost their packs or positions. Betrayal, political purges, refusing corrupt alphas, old oaths that cost them everything. Evren had been the son of an alpha who tried to expose a trafficking ring and was killed for it. Saren had witnessed an elder murdering a rival and was exiled when she spoke up. Lyra had refused to let warriors die of treatable wounds just because they had questioned orders. Auron had protected a group of Omegas from abuse and been labeled a traitor. Story after story of people who had been thrown away for doing the right thing, people who had chosen integrity over safety. Saphira realized she wasn't the only one built from broken places. This found family was made almost entirely of people someone else had decided were expendable. The knowledge settled something in her chest. She wasn't alone. She had never been as alone as Ashfall had made her feel. When the stories ended, Lucien spoke into the quiet. Ashfall will come. Soon. They're not going to let this stand. Nods around the circle. Everyone knew. We can fight, or we can run, Lucien continued. But before we decide, I want Saphira to understand something. This cave, these mountains, this prophecy, none of it owns you. If you want to walk away from all of this and build a life somewhere quiet, we'll make that happen. No judgment, no shame. All eyes turned to Saphira. The weight of the choice pressed down on her shoulders. She thought about running, about finding some distant territory where no one knew her name or her prophecy, about living a simple, quiet life away from pack politics and ancient powers. It would be easier, safer. But her wolf snarled at the thought. After years of being silenced, the idea of choosing silence again felt like a betrayal. I'm tired of being small, Saphira said. I'm tired of being afraid. If Ashfall wants a fight, then we give them one, and whatever is sleeping beneath this mountain, we face it when the time comes, together. Around the circle, heads nodded. Auron's expression was proud. Saren grinned, fierce and approving. Lucien's hand found Saphira's, fingers lacing together. Then we stand, he said. And we prepare. The guard began discussing fortifications, trap locations, escape routes, strategic choke points. They had done this before, defended impossible positions against superior numbers. They knew how to make a mountain their ally. As the planning continued, Saphira felt something shift inside her. Not her wolf fully emerging, not yet, but a quiet certainty settling into her bones. She had crawled into this cave to die, but she was going to walk out of it ready to live. Chapter 7. Dawn in the Cave. Days passed in preparation. The guard fortified the cave entrance, set traps along the ravine approaches, and established watch rotations. They trained Saphira in basic combat, not expecting her to become a warrior overnight, but giving her enough skills to protect herself if needed. And every night, she practiced reaching for her wolf. It got easier. The presence inside her became less alien, more familiar. She learned the shape of her wolf's rage and her grief, and her fierce determination to never be caged again. They were learning to move together instead of fighting each other. One morning, Saphira woke in the center of the wolf nest again. But this time, everything felt different. She wasn't a victim they had rescued. She was Pack. She was theirs, and they were hers. She threaded her fingers through Evren's thick fur, feeling him rumble contentedly. Lyra, still in wolf form, grumbled in her sleep and shifted closer. The warmth and safety of the nest no longer felt like borrowed comfort. It felt like home. Lucien, in human form, sat near the cave entrance with Orin, discussing watch schedules. When he saw Saphira awake, he caught her eye and smiled. Small, private, just for her. Something warm bloomed in her chest. After breakfast, Saphira made her way to the cave entrance alone. Dawn light painted the frost-lined peaks in gold and pink. The air was cold and sharp and clean. She placed her hand on the stone and spoke softly. To the mountain, to the goddess, to herself. This is mine now. This cave, these wolves, this choice. I claim it all. Her wolf stirred, pleased, and for just a moment, Saphira's eyes flashed with faint light, gold like sunrise, like amber, like power finally waking. The air around her hummed, responding to her words. Behind her, the Varengard had gathered. They moved as one, dropping to one knee, not in worship but in acknowledgement, a formal vow. Lucien spoke for all of them. We stand between you and whatever tries to chain you again, whether it wears an alpha crown or crawls up from beneath the stone. This is our oath. Saphira turned to face them, heart full. And I swear I will never use you like tools the way alphas used me. You're not my weapons. You're my family. One by one, they rose. Orin nodded solemnly. Saren clasped her shoulder. Evren's rare smile appeared. Lyra squeezed her hand. This was Pack. Real Pack. Built on choice and respect, and mutual protection. That evening, as the sun set and painted the cave in warm light, Lucien found Saphira sitting near the main fire. He settled beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched, and handed her a cup of hot tea. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the flames dance. Finally, Lucien spoke. When you're ready to terrify an entire pack and wake an ancient monster, I'll be right there. Trying not to be jealous of a mountain, Saphira laughed. A real laugh, bright and unguarded. Maybe the first genuine laugh she had allowed herself in years. Jealous of a mountain? She asked, teasing. You did claim it pretty thoroughly, he said, deadpan. Then his expression softened. It's good to hear you laugh. Their eyes met. The playful moment shifted into something deeper. Saphira's hand moved almost unconsciously to rest over the marks on her palm, and Lucien's hand covered hers, pressing gently. The glow beneath their joined hands pulsed once, warm and certain. When this is over, Saphira said quietly, when we've faced whatever comes, I want to figure out what this bond means. With time to choose, not just need. Lucien's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. I'll wait as long as you need. The promise settled between them, solid as stone. Far below, in Ashfall territory, Ronan assembled his war party, 20 of the strongest warriors, armed and ready. They would march at dawn. In the pack house, Darian and Era watched through the windows, their expressions troubled. She'll destroy him, Era said quietly. Or he'll kill her, Darian replied. Either way, the prophecy will be fulfilled or broken. There's no middle ground now. And deep, deep beneath the mountain, in chambers no one had walked for centuries, something ancient stirred. The heartbeat that had been slow and steady began to quicken, just slightly. The thing sealed beneath the stone could feel the power awakening above it. It could feel the hollowed wolf filling with light. And it began, slowly, to wake. They thought the storm would bury her. Instead, it introduced her to 15 reasons to live. Saphira Dune crawled into a cave to die, and woke up, surrounded by wolves who saw worth in the girl everyone else had thrown away. She is no longer the nameless Omega at the edge of the fire. She is a woman on the edge of discovering how terrifying it is when the quiet one decides to stop being quiet. The rejected Omega has found her cave, her guard, and the first fragile pieces of her power. But Ashfall is marching. Ronan brings 20 warriors to reclaim or destroy the girl he cast away. And something older than any pack is listening beneath the stone, waiting to see if Saphira will claim her full strength or let fear keep her small. The hollowed wolf is learning to howl. And when she does, the entire world will stop to listen. If you want to be there the moment Saphira Dune stops surviving and starts rewriting the laws of her world, make sure you're subscribed to Ariel Romance Library and your notifications are on. You won't want to miss what wakes when the girl they called Hollow finally learns to shake mountains. This is only the beginning of her story, and it's going to be unforgettable.